I was 9 years old the first time I understood that my grandmother came from somewhere else. I was standing in a friend's kitchen, 2 streets over, and a black cat came up onto their back step. And I said what I'd been taught to say. I said, "Oh, that's good luck." And that girl's grandmother turned around from the sink and told me, kindly but very firmly, that I had it exactly backwards. 2 grown women, 4 streets apart, both of them certain. Both raised by mothers who were never wrong about anything. And that was the day it landed on me. My grandmother's rules weren't the rules. They were her rules. She'd carried them across an ocean from a coal country in the north of England and set them down in a coal town in the West Virginia mountains. And some of them didn't survive the crossing at all. So tonight, I want to show you what happened to those old rules when they got on a boat. The ones that flipped clean over. The ones that came through without a scratch. The ones that quietly died on the way. And the ones my grandmother had to learn all over again from women in these hills. Keep count of which version your family got, because I'll bet you a shiny penny you've got one of each in you and never knew where they came from. And there's one thing she and this whole town never agreed on, not once in 40 years. It was hanging right over her door the entire time. That's number 12. Number 1. The black cat. You know the American version in your bones. Black cat crosses your path. That's trouble, and I've already told you what the old folks did about it, so I won't go back over that ground. But in the country my grandmother came from, a black cat was luck. Good luck. A black cat that turned up at your door and decided to stay was a fortune arriving. There were brides given black kittens as wedding presents. Sailors' wives kept black cats at home to keep their husbands safe at sea. Same animal, same colour, one ocean. Completely opposite verdict, and both sides absolutely certain. Number 2. The magpie and the job it left behind. In England, the magpie was the bird you watched for, and everybody knew the counting. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, and on up from there. And you did not just let a lone magpie go by. You greeted it out loud, and some folks asked politely after its wife, because a magpie alone was thought to be one whose mate had gone, and that was where the sorrow came from. Now here's the thing, nobody tells you about old rules crossing water. My grandmother got here, and there were no magpies. Not one. Whole bird just doesn't live in these mountains. So the job went to the crow. Everything the magpie carried in the old country got handed straight to the crow here. The counting, the sorrow, the single bird on the fence post, that means something. Same belief. New bird. It found the nearest thing with black feathers and moved in. Number 3. The lump of coal. In the coal country my grandmother came from, a piece of coal was luck. Genuine, straightforward good fortune. You carried a lump of it in your pocket. You gave it as a gift at the new year, and a dark-haired man bringing coal to your door was the best start to a year you could hope for. Coal meant warmth. Coal meant the fire stays lit and the family stays fed. She came to a coal town in these mountains, and here, coal was not luck. Coal was the company. Coal was your father's back, and the dust in his lungs and the whistle going off at the wrong hour. Nobody in my town was putting a lump of it in their pocket for good fortune. Same black rock. In one country, it's a blessing you hand a neighbour. In the other, it's what you hope your son doesn't have to go down after. Number 4. The colour green. Here's one that's vanished so completely that people look at me sideways when I bring it up. Green was unlucky. Deeply, seriously unlucky, and my grandmother would not have it on a wedding. The old belief holds that green belongs to the fair folk, and to wear it is to put yourself forward, to invite their attention when you'd rather not have it. Married in green, ashamed to be seen. That's how it was said. Green cars were unlucky. Green on a bride was asking for trouble. And I watched this one fail, in front of the whole town. There was a girl here who got married in a green dress, on purpose. She loved the colour, and she was not going to be told. And I remember my grandmother going quiet when she heard. Not angry, just quiet, the way she got. That marriage went on and on, long after everybody who'd whispered about that dress had quit whispering. And she kept it, wore it again on an anniversary, years later, and had the whole church laughing about it. And my grandmother knew it. She watched that couple for decades, same as everybody else. She never once said she'd been wrong about green, but she never brought it up again either, which, from her, was a considerable concession. Now, those 4 flipped over or fell apart. But some rules made the crossing without losing a thing. Number 5. The ones that came through whole. And these you'll recognise instantly, every one. Knock on wood. Spilled salt over the left shoulder. Don't whistle in the house. Bless you when somebody sneezes. Crossed fingers. A horseshoe over the door. Hold on to that one. Those didn't change a bit between the old country and these hills. Not the meaning, not the cure, not one detail. And I've come to think that's because those aren't English and they aren't American. They're just old. Older than either country, older than the crossing, older than anybody's grandmother. Whatever those beliefs are made of, it's the kind of thing that doesn't care what continent it's standing on. Number 6. The little people. Now here's a whole world that didn't make it. In the old country there were rules, real rules, followed carefully, about the fair folk. You didn't say their names straight out. You called them the good neighbours, the gentry, the little people, anything but the true word, because to name a thing is to call it. You left a saucer of milk out. You did not build on their ground or disturb their hills. And there are people to this day who'll route a road around one rather than find out. My grandmother knew every one of those rules. And she brought them here, to a mountain that had never heard of any of it. There were no fairy forts in West Virginia, no mounds anybody would point to, no hedges anybody would leave standing on their account. And within one generation, hers. The whole thing was simply gone. She was the last person in my family who knew what you were supposed to call them. Number 7. The trees you don't touch. Same story, different shape. In the old country, the hawthorn was not to be cut. A lone hawthorn standing out in a field belonged to somebody, and it was left alone, and farmers ploughed around it. Elder was worse. You didn't bring elder flowers into the house, you didn't burn elder wood, and if you had to cut one, you asked its pardon first. Those trees don't grow here the way they grow there, and the ones that do didn't come with the reputation. My grandmother kept the habit anyway, a little sheepishly. She'd not have elder flowers on her table, and she couldn't have told you why in a way that would satisfy you. Just, we don't. Number 8. The sea rules, stranded in the mountains. This is the strangest one on the whole list, and I think about it more than any of them. She came from a place where families lost people 2 ways, down the mine and out on the water. And with the water came a whole book of rules. You don't sail on a Friday. You don't whistle on a deck, because whistling calls up wind and you may get more than you bargained for. There were words you did not say out loud on a boat. She carried every one of those rules 400 miles inland, to a place where the nearest salt water was 2 days away and nobody in the county owned anything bigger than a john boat. And she still kept them. She still wouldn't have somebody whistling indoors, and part of that was the mine, but part of it was a sea she was never going to see again. She held on to sailors' rules in a town full of coal miners, because by then they weren't really about boats. They were about the people who'd taught them to her. Now that's what she brought with her. Here's what she had to learn. Number 9. Snakes. Nothing in the north of England prepares a woman for a West Virginia summer. There's no rattlesnake in her old country. There's barely a snake worth the name. And she landed in these hills, where every woman around her had a whole body of knowledge about them. Signs and cures and rules about what you don't kill in the yard and what you never turn your back on. She learned it. Grown, with children of her own already, sitting in other women's kitchens taking instruction like a girl. That's the part that gets me. My grandmother, who was never wrong about anything, had to sit and be taught. Number 10. The blue porch ceiling. You've seen these all over the South and you probably thought it was just a pretty colour. Haint blue. That soft blue-green they paint porch ceilings and window frames and door surrounds all through these mountains and down through the low country. The belief behind it is that a haint, a restless spirit, cannot cross water. So you paint the ceiling, the colour of water and the sky, and the thing gets confused and goes on by, and your porch stays yours. That is not an English idea. It grew up here, out of the people who were already in these mountains and the people who were brought here. and it spread through the hills until half the porches had it. And my grandmother, who came with a whole trunk full of rules from somewhere else, had a blue porch ceiling like everybody's grandmother in this county. She adopted it wholesale. Number 11. The women who talked the fire out. Here's the one that's purely of these mountains, and I'll tell it the way it was told to me and let you do what you like with it. There were women here. Every county had one who could talk the fire out of a burn. Stop blood with words. They didn't charge, ever. That was the rule, and taking money was said to break the gift. And the knowledge was handed down crossways. A woman taught a man taught a woman, never to your own same kind, or it wouldn't hold. My grandmother had never in her life heard of such a thing before she came here. And there was a child in this town, a long time ago, who got scalded bad. A pot off a stove, the way it happens. Before the doctor got there, somebody had already gone and fetched the woman who talked fire. She sat by that child and said, whatever it was, she said, quiet, so nobody heard the words, because you weren't supposed to hear them. And the screaming stopped. That's the part everybody in this town agrees on, whatever else they think about it. The child settled and slept. Now, a doctor would tell you a child that age wears out, and that shock does what shock does, and I'd not argue a word of it. I wasn't there, and I don't have an explanation. I only know the whole town told that story for 50 years, and my grandmother, who came from a country that had never heard of fire talking, believed it to the end of her life. Number 12. Which way the horseshoe hangs. Here we are. 40 years of disagreement, hanging right over her door the whole time. My grandmother hung her horseshoe with the ends pointing up. Like a cup, she'd say. Like a vessel. You hang it that way so the luck sits in it and stays. Hang it the other way and everything you've got just runs out onto the floor. And a good half of this town hung theirs pointing down. On purpose. Because that way, they said, the luck pours down over everybody who walks in your door. It spills onto your guests, blesses whoever crosses under it. Point it up, and you're just being selfish with it. Both versions are old. Both cross the ocean. And I have watched neighbours argue about it in a church parking lot with real heat in their voices, because it is not a small thing to be told you've been hanging your luck upside down for 30 years. And here is what I finally understood, years after she was gone. That argument was never about the luck. Think about what that woman actually did. She left a country. She left a house and a father who walked her down to a boat and put the last thing he had into her hand. She came to a town of strangers in mountains she'd never seen, where the birds were wrong and the trees were wrong, and coal meant something entirely different than it had meant at home. And the first thing she did, the very first thing, was nail a piece of iron over the door, the way her mother had done it, the way it was done where she came from. Not because she'd studied the physics of luck, because when you have lost the entire world you came from, the rules are what you have left of it. And you put them up on your own door, in your own house, in the country that isn't yours yet, and you refuse to hang them anybody else's way. And you keep refusing for 40 years, until one day it is your country, and your door, and the rules on it are simply how things are done in your family. That's not superstition. That's a woman planting a flag. So let me ask you, and I mean it, where did your family's rules actually come from? Which country? Which grandmother? Which crossing? And have you ever found out that a rule you grew up on means the exact opposite somewhere else, and had to sit with the fact that both sides were dead certain? Tell me down in the comments. I especially want the ones that got flipped clean over. Because here's the truth of it, as near as I can tell. Every one of these rules is somebody's homesickness, dressed up as good sense. Somewhere behind every last one of them is a person who moved away from everything they knew and took the only thing they could fit in a trunk. Not the furniture, the rules, how we do it, how we've always done it. And if you keep them, you're not being foolish. You're keeping somebody. That's all it ever was. So what's your count? How many of yours came from the old country? And how many did your family pick up right where they landed? And go on and tell me which way you hang yours. I'll take the ends upside, seeing as I was raised by the woman who was never wrong. I read every last one. Knock on wood on your way out.